Get him off this plane, right now. People dressed like that don't sit in my first-class cabin." The words didn't come out as a whisper. They didn't come out as a question. They came out the way a verdict comes out. Loud, certain, and already decided before anyone had a chance to speak. Captain Brett Holloway stood in the narrow aisle of Valor Airlines Flight 882, his broad shoulders filling the space between the rows, his voice carrying all the way to the back of the first-class cabin and probably halfway into economy. He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't cautious. He said it the way a man says something he has said 100 times before and never once been told he was wrong. He was looking at the black man in seat 2A, the man in the gray hoodie who had dared to sit down. What Captain Brett Holloway did not know, could not have known, was that in exactly 19 minutes, he would be standing on that same jet bridge, handing over the gold wings he had worn for 28 years. To the man he had just tried to erase. The cabin went still. Not the polite, uncomfortable kind of still that happens when someone drops a glass. This was a different kind of still. The kind where everyone stops breathing at exactly the same moment because they have just heard something that cannot be unsaid. A woman in row 3 looked down at her magazine and did not look back up. A man in row 1 adjusted his cufflinks twice in 5 seconds. Near the back of first class, a young man in a window seat slowly, quietly raised his phone. Nobody moved to help. Nobody said a word. And the man in seat 2A, the man in the gray hoodie with the worn leather messenger bag and the calm, unreadable eyes, simply looked up at Captain Holloway and said nothing at all. Because he didn't need to, not yet. Before we get into everything that happened on that jet bridge, before we get to the moment Brett Holloway's hands shook as he unpinned those gold wings from his chest, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city in the comments below. And if this story stopped you mid-scroll, the way it stopped every single passenger on that plane, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Because what you're about to hear is the kind of story that stays with you. Now let's go back to where it all started. Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, Terminal C, 7:18 in the morning. The air inside the terminal had that particular quality that airports always have before the rest of the world has fully woken up. Recycled and cool, carrying traces of coffee from the stands near the security checkpoint, underneath that the faint chemical smell of floor cleaner that hadn't quite dried yet. Families moved in slow, tired clusters. Business travelers walked alone and fast-rolling carry-ons clicking against the tile like a kind of private drumbeat. The departure board above Gate 44 showed Valor Airlines Flight 882 to Washington Dulles on time boarding in 22 minutes. Marcus Webb moved through the terminal without hurrying. He was 44 years old, and he had the kind of build that suggested he had been stronger once. Wide shoulders that had broadened with age rather than narrowed arms that filled out the sleeves of his gray hoodie without straining them. His jeans were dark navy clean, but not new. His sneakers were black well-worn at the toe, the kind of shoes you wore because they were comfortable, not because you were trying to impress anyone. His leather messenger bag was slung over his left shoulder, the strap worn pale at the point it crossed his chest. The bag was old. It had traveled to 31 states and 4 countries. It looked like something a graduate student might carry. He looked quite intentionally like absolutely nobody special. His phone buzzed in his jacket pocket, the inner pocket where he kept things he didn't want visible. He pulled it out without breaking stride. One message, from a contact saved simply as V. Okafor, direct. "Last run, Marcus. Whatever happens on that plane document, everything, I mean everything." Marcus read it once, read it again, then locked the screen and slid the phone back into the inner pocket next to the leather wallet that held, among other things, a badge that most people in this terminal would spend their entire careers never seeing up close. He looked up at the departure board. Gate 44, 20 minutes. He exhaled slowly through his nose, rolled his right shoulder once, a habit he'd had since law school, a way of settling himself before something difficult. Then he adjusted the strap of his messenger bag and kept walking. Marcus Webb was not on his way to Washington for a meeting. He was not taking a vacation. He was not visiting family or attending a conference or doing any of the 100 ordinary things that the other passengers in Terminal C were doing that morning. He was on his way to Washington because in 4 days' time he was scheduled to sit across a desk from the Deputy Secretary of Transportation and deliver a recommendation that would determine whether Valor Airlines kept their federal operating authority for the next 5 years. He had been working toward that recommendation for 4 months. The official term for what Marcus did was Senior Compliance Auditor Office of Inspector General, United States Department of Transportation. The unofficial term, the one that people in aviation used when they thought he wasn't listening, was the ghost. He was the man whose name appeared on certified letters that made airline lawyers go pale. He was the man who had walked undercover through the boarding process of 11 different carriers in the past 3 years, documenting every interaction, every decision, every moment where a passenger's race or appearance had altered the quality of service they received. He had built cases that resulted in 2 consent decrees, 1 federal settlement, and the forced resignation of a regional vice president who had thought his position was permanent. He did not do this work from behind a desk. He did it from seat 2A. For the past 4 months, he had been running what the Department of Transportation officially called a compliance assessment of Valor Airlines. Unofficially, he had been following a thread that started with an anonymous tip submitted to the DOT's Civil Rights Hotline last October. The tip described a pattern at Valor's Dallas hub specifically: passengers of color traveling alone in casual clothing, being stopped at the gate, questioned, redirected, rerouted. Not always loudly, not always obviously. Sometimes it was just a slightly longer pause before the boarding pass was scanned. Sometimes it was a request for additional identification that other passengers weren't asked to provide. Sometimes it was a seat assignment that had mysteriously changed between booking and boarding. Small things, each one individually explainable. Together they formed something that wasn't explainable at all. Marcus had 47 documented incidents in his files. Today's flight was the final test. His phone buzzed again. This time it was his assistant Desiree who knew only that he was traveling and not why. Flight 882 is showing on time. Safe travels. He typed back, "Thanks. I'll check in when I land." He put the phone away and looked out through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the tarmac. The aircraft assigned to Flight 882 was already at the gate. A Boeing 737 white with Valor's blue and gold stripe along the fuselage. The morning sun was low enough that it caught the windows of the cockpit and turned them copper. Marcus looked at the plane for a long moment. He thought about the 17-year-old version of himself who had stood in another airport, in another terminal, looking at another departure board, trying to figure out why the TSA agent had pulled him out of line. He didn't let himself stay in that memory. Not yet. He had learned that there was a time and a place for the past, and the middle of a terminal 20 minutes before boarding was not it. He picked up his pace slightly and moved toward Gate 44. Ryan Garfield was 21 years old and had been working the gate at DFW Terminal C for 8 months. He had brown hair that he kept combed a Valor Airlines uniform that he wore with the particular stiffness of someone who still believed the uniform was important, and eyes that had developed in 8 months of gate work, a habit that he would have called professional judgment and that Marcus Webb would have called something else entirely. Ryan scanned people, not their tickets, people. He did it the way some people read a room before walking in. A quick sweep head to foot, a sorting that happened below the level of conscious thought. Business suit, yes. Yoga pants and earbuds, yes. Designer carry-on, yes. Hoodie jeans, worn sneakers, beaten-up bag. He was looking at Marcus before Marcus had reached the priority boarding lane. Marcus took his place at the front of the lane. He had his phone out, the boarding pass displayed clearly. Seat 2, A Zone 1. Priority first class, the QR code large and centered on the screen. He had been careful about this. He always was. Ryan looked at Marcus. Not at the phone, at Marcus. "Sir." His voice had the particular quality of someone using professional courtesy as a weapon. "Priority boarding is for first class and elite members only. General boarding begins in about 15 minutes. I'm aware, Marcus said. He kept his voice even. He extended the phone toward Ryan, the QR code facing outward. I'm in first class, seat 2A. Ryan did not look at the phone. His eyes moved from Marcus's face to his hoodie to his jeans to his bag and back up again, completing the circuit in about 2 seconds. Do you have your confirmation email? There's been some technical difficulty with mobile passes this morning. There had been no such announcement. Marcus knew this. He also knew that the woman behind him, white mid-40s in a blazer carrying a canvas tote from a boutique hotel, had just been waved through without a word. Please scan the code, Marcus said. Ryan picked up the scanner with the slow deliberateness of a man who has already decided what the result will be. He aimed it at Marcus's phone. The scanner beeped. A green light blinked on Ryan's screen. Web/M, seat 2A, first class, priority boarding. Ryan stared at the screen. Something moved across his face. Not embarrassment, not recognition, but a kind of recalibration, the way a person looks when the machine has told them something they didn't expect and they're deciding whether to believe the machine or their own judgment. He chose his own judgment. Give me 1 moment, he said. He turned to the young woman standing at the secondary podium. Sophia Navarro, 26 years old, 2 years at Valor, the kind of person who came to work early and stayed late and had been increasingly uncomfortable for the past 4 minutes. Can you cross-check the manifest on that name, Webb? Sophia pulled up the manifest on her screen. She looked at it. She looked at Ryan. She looked at Marcus. Her mouth opened slightly. He's there, she said quietly. Seat 2A. Booked 41 days ago. Ryan did not react to this the way a person should react to being wrong. He nodded, once returned the scanner to its holster and pointed toward the jet bridge with a gesture that contained not one syllable of apology. Down the ramp. Marcus held Ryan's gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Long enough for Ryan to understand that Marcus had noticed everything. The hesitation, the detour to Sophia, the decision not to apologize. Not long enough to create a confrontation that would give Ryan something to report. Thank you, Marcus said, and turned toward the jet bridge. He was halfway down the ramp when he heard it. Ryan's voice, low, directed at Sophia, meant only for her. Keep an eye on that one. Marcus's grip tightened on the strap of his messenger bag. He kept walking. The hollow echo of his footsteps against the metal floor of the jet bridge matched his heartbeat exactly. Steady, controlled, a rhythm he had practiced for 20 years. He made a mental note of the time. 7:26 a.m. He made a mental note of Ryan Garfield's name. He stepped onto the aircraft. The first-class cabin of Flight 882 smelled of leather and something faintly floral, the kind of scent piped deliberately through the ventilation system to suggest luxury. The seats were wide and cream-colored, each one separated from its neighbor by a small padded armrest. The overhead bins were open and mostly empty. The lighting was warm and directed downward, the kind designed to make people feel that they had arrived somewhere they deserved to be. Diana Price stood at the entrance to the cabin with the practiced posture of a woman who had spent 14 years deciding who belonged and who didn't. She was 38 years old, with blonde hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to flatten the expression on her face into something permanently neutral. Her Valor Airlines uniform was exact. Every button, every pin, every crease where a crease was supposed to be. Her smile was the kind that lived on the surface of the face without ever making it to the eyes. She looked at Marcus as he stepped through the cabin door. She did not say, "Welcome aboard." She did not say good morning. She took one step to her left, just slightly, just enough, placing herself between Marcus and the forward section of the cabin, and said, "Economy is that way, sir." Behind Marcus, a man in a charcoal suit walked through the door. Diana stepped back. "Good morning. Right this way." Marcus did not move from where he stood. He extended his phone toward Diana. The same boarding pass, the same seat number, the same green-approved QR code, and said seat 2A. Diana looked at the phone screen with the expression of someone looking at a document they suspect is forged. She tilted her head slightly. "There may have been a system update since you boarded. I'll need a moment to verify." "It was verified at the gate," Marcus said. "I understand that. Please wait here." She turned and walked toward the galley at the front of the cabin. Through the gap between the galley curtain and the wall, Marcus could see her lift the intercom handset. He could not hear what she said, but he watched her eyes move to him twice during the 30 seconds she held the phone to her ear. He stepped past the threshold into the cabin. He walked to seat 2A. He placed his messenger bag in the overhead bin directly above the seat. He sat down. He fastened his seatbelt. He pressed his back against the leather and closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to slow his heart rate deliberately the way he had taught himself to do in depositions when the opposing counsel said something designed to rattle him. Document, observe, do not engage beyond what is necessary. Let them show you who they are. He opened his eyes. The cabin was filling slowly. In the seat directly across the aisle, 2B, sat a woman he noticed immediately. Dr. Patricia Moore was 61 years old, silver-haired, wearing reading glasses on the end of her nose and a cardigan the color of sage. She had the unhurried quality of someone who had been important for a long time and had stopped needing to prove it. She was reading something on a tablet. She glanced up when Marcus sat down. Their eyes met for a moment, hers sharp and assessing in the way of someone who had spent decades making quick judgments about patients. And she gave a brief, uncomplicated nod before returning to her reading. 3 rows back near the window on the right side, a young white man in his late 20s had his phone out and was filming with the practiced casualness of someone who had done it many times before. Jordan Park, 27 years old, travel blogger, 280,000 followers across platforms. He had noticed the exchange at the cabin door. He had noticed Diana's step to the left. He had noticed everything, and he had made a decision, and his thumb was already pressing the live stream button. On his screen, in small gray numerals that would grow over the next hour, 12 viewers, then 31, then 89. Diana returned from the galley. She stood in the aisle at the entrance to the first-class section and looked at Marcus in his seat with an expression that had abandoned its earlier pretense of neutrality. "Sir, I asked you to wait. I have my assigned seat. I sat in it. We have a policy regarding—" "What policy?" Diana paused. The pause lasted 2 seconds too long. "Regarding carry-on placement in the overhead bins for unverified first-class passengers." Marcus looked up at the bin. His bag was inside it. The bin was otherwise empty. He looked back at Diana. "It's an empty bin. Those bins are reserved for verified premium passengers. I am a verified premium passenger. My seat was scanned at the gate. Your colleague confirmed me on the manifest." From across the aisle, Dr. Moore had lowered her tablet. She was no longer reading. Diana's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'll need to see your ID. Your gate agent did not ask other passengers for ID. I'm asking you." Marcus reached into his back pocket, pulled out his driver's license, not the wallet, just the license, and held it up. Diana looked at it, looked at him, looked at the boarding pass on his phone, a sequence that concluded with nothing except the fact that everything was in order and she had no grounds to continue, and she knew it. She handed the license back with the particular precision of someone setting down something they wish they could keep. "Your bag should go under the seat in front of you." Marcus looked at the bin, looked at Diana. He stood up, opened the bin, retrieved his bag, placed it under the seat, and sat back down. He maintained eye contact with her throughout the entire process. She looked away first. "Flight time to Washington." "Dulles is approximately 3 hours and 20 minutes, she said to no one in particular. "We'll begin our safety demonstration shortly." She moved toward the galley. Marcus looked at the overhead bin, still empty, still open. He reached up and placed his bag back inside it. He shut the bin. He sat back down. In row 3, Jordan Park pressed a finger to his lips to muffle a sound that was not quite a laugh. On his screen, 412 viewers. The comment section was already moving. The boarding door was sealed at 7:54 a.m. The jet bridge retracted. The seatbelt sign glowed amber. Flight 882 was preparing to push back. Marcus had his eyes closed and his noise-canceling headphones around his neck, not on his ears. A deliberate choice, keeping his hearing available. The cabin had settled into the particular pre-departure quiet of people adjusting to their seats, stowing their last items, scrolling through phones before airplane mode. Around him, the machinery of departure was moving, and everything appeared to any casual observer to be proceeding normally. Then he felt a tap on his shoulder. He had been expecting it. He opened his eyes. Diana Price was standing over him, and she was not alone. Captain Brett Holloway filled the aisle behind her the way a weather system fills a horizon. Large, inescapable, and carrying the kind of pressure that changes everything around it. He was 56 years old, and he had spent 28 of those years in cockpits, and the preceding years before that, becoming the kind of man who walked into rooms already knowing he was the most important person in them. His hair was silver at the temples and steel gray on top. His jaw was the kind of jaw that photographs well. His uniform was exact, and his posture was the kind that came not from effort, but from decades of certainty about his own position in the hierarchy of things. His face, however, was flushed. Not the flush of exertion. The flush of a man who has been told something that irritated him and has decided to resolve the irritation personally. He looked at Marcus the way a man looks at something that has appeared where it should not be. "Sir." His voice wasn't asking. It was announcing. "We need a word." Marcus straightened in his seat. He kept his hands visible, both of them resting on the armrests. He had learned this. The importance of hands being visible, of posture being open, of giving no one anything they could reframe as threatening. "Is there a problem?" "That's what I'm trying to establish," Holloway said. He leaned one hand on the overhead bin. The one Marcus had placed his bag in, the one Diana had told him was for verified premium passengers only. And the lean was not casual. It was calculated. A physical narrowing of space, a pressure applied without contact. "My lead flight attendant tells me you were uncooperative at boarding. I'm also getting a report that there's a discrepancy with your ticket." "There is no discrepancy," Marcus said. "I scanned in at the gate. I showed your flight attendant my driver's license. My name is on the manifest. The seat is mine." Holloway looked at Diana. She spoke. The gate agent called down after Mr. Webb boarded. She indicated the credit card used for the booking was flagged by our fraud detection system. "The name on the card doesn't match the passenger profile in our records." Marcus let a moment pass before he responded. Not because he didn't have a response, but because he wanted every passenger in earshot to have time to hear what had just been said. "Flagged for fraud," he repeated. "Ma'am, that card is a corporate credit card issued by the United States government. If it had been flagged for fraud, you would have federal agents standing in this aisle, not a flight attendant." He paused. "I'd like to speak to your supervisor." "You're speaking to him," Holloway said. "I mean someone above you." The temperature in the first-class cabin dropped several degrees. Holloway's eyes went to a particular quality of flat that Marcus recognized. The look of a man who had not been spoken to this way in a long time and did not intend to allow it to continue. "Listen to me very carefully," Holloway said, and his voice had dropped, losing the professional register, entirely becoming something more personal and more dangerous. "I don't know what's going on with your ticket. I don't know what story you've been telling yourself about why you're sitting up here, but I have a departure slot in 4 minutes, and I have a standby passenger on the list who has a legitimate claim to this cabin. You are going to stand up, you are going to take your bag, and you are going to walk off this aircraft." He let that sit for exactly 1 second. "Or I'm going to make a call that ends with you being walked off." "I'm sitting in a seat I paid for," Marcus said, enunciating each word with the particular clarity he used in depositions. "I have shown identification. I have offered documentation. I am not moving." Holloway straightened up. He reached up and opened the overhead bin. He reached inside and pulled Marcus's messenger bag out. He held it for a moment. Held it with both hands, the weight of it the leather warm from the pressurized cabin air. And then he set it down on the floor of the aisle. The sound it made when it hit the carpet was small, but the effect was not small at all. A sound moved through the cabin. Not words, not a shout, but a collective sharp intake of breath, the kind that happens when something crosses a line that everyone in the room can feel, but no one has drawn out loud. Dr. Patricia Moore set her tablet face down on her tray table. Her hands did not move for a moment. Then they moved to her phone. "This is your final opportunity," Holloway said to Marcus. "Stand up and walk off." Marcus looked at his bag on the floor. He looked at Holloway. When he spoke, his voice was very low and very controlled, each syllable weighted with the particular gravity of a man who knows exactly what he holds and is choosing for now not to show it. "Captain Holloway, you just made this a federal matter. Holloway's mouth curved slightly. Not a smile, something more contemptuous than a smile. "Call your lawyer. I won't need one." Holloway turned on his heel, walked back to the cockpit, and pulled the door closed behind him. The sound of the latch catching was very loud in the silence that followed. Diana Price remained in the aisle. She looked at Marcus's bag on the floor. She looked at Marcus. Something moved across her face. A flicker of something that might have been doubt. And then it was gone, replaced by the practiced blankness of someone who had decided to keep going regardless. "You should have accepted the seat in economy when you had the chance," she said. She said it quietly, but not quietly enough. This could have been simple. Marcus looked up at her. The anger that anyone else might have felt, the anger that would have been entirely justified, was not what was on Marcus Webb's face. What was on Marcus Webb's face was something much quieter and much more specific. The cold, clinical focus of a man who had been waiting for this moment for 4 months and had just watched the last piece of evidence he needed fall into place. "Diana," he said gently, "do you own your home?" She blinked. "That is absolutely none of your—" "I'm just asking," Marcus said, "because you're going to lose this job. And I want you to remember that I gave you this exact moment to make a different choice." Diana's face flushed red. She opened her mouth. Then she closed it. Then she turned and walked briskly to the forward galley and picked up the intercom handset. Her voice came through the cabin speakers. 30 seconds later, flat and official. "Cabin crew, we have an uncooperative passenger in row 2. Security requested at gate 44. All crew, please be advised." In row 3, Jordan Park looked at his screen. The live stream viewer count had climbed to 8,400. The comment section was moving so fast the individual comments were barely readable. He said quietly into the camera, his voice low enough not to carry guys. "They called security on him. His ticket is valid. I scanned it at the gate myself. I'm watching this happen in real time." From seat 2, B. Dr. Patricia Moore stood up. She walked to the galley entrance and spoke to Diana's back. "I want to speak to someone in authority this moment." "Diana, without turning around, ma'am, please return to your seat." Dr. Moore did not return to her seat. She stood in the galley entrance with the specific immovability of a woman who had spent 30 years as the most competent person in operating rooms and was not going to be dismissed by someone who was not. That man's belongings were removed from the overhead bin by the captain of this aircraft. That is his property. And that interaction is going on the record whether you acknowledge it or not. Diana turned around. Her expression was the expression of a person running out of moves. "Ma'am?" "I am a retired physician. I know what I saw. I am telling you that I saw it. And if this aircraft departs before that man is given the treatment that his valid ticket entitles him to, I will file a complaint with every regulatory body I can name. And I can name quite a few." The two women looked at each other. Then the heavy sound of boots on the jet bridge reached the cabin, and 2 security officers came through the aircraft door. Officer Dale Pruitt was 45 years old and had the build of a man who had once been athletic and had since replaced the athleticism with something harder and less flexible. He came through the cabin door with the specific energy of a person who has already been told what the situation is and has already decided how to handle it. He did not look at the cabin. He looked at the man in the gray hoodie in seat 2A and he walked toward him. Behind him, Officer Thomas Reyes moved more slowly. He was 29 years old and he had been on the airport security detail for 14 months, and he had the particular expression of someone who was keeping their own assessment in reserve. "Let's go, buddy," Pruitt said. He reached for Marcus's arm. "I am complying with your lawful order to deplane." "Marcus," said his voice carrying clearly through the cabin. He raised both hands, palms open and visible. "I am not resisting. Please do not use force on a compliant subject." Pruitt's hand closed around Marcus's bicep regardless. "Do not put your hands on me," Marcus said, not louder but with a precision that made several nearby passengers look away as if they'd seen something they couldn't unsee. Pruitt pulled him out of the seat and into the aisle. Marcus stumbled 1 step, recovered, and straightened. His phone, which had been resting on his tray table open to a document he had been reviewing, slid off the tray and hit the floor. "My phone," Marcus said. Pruitt stepped over it toward the door. "Officer." Marcus's voice had not risen. That is my personal property. Reyes bent down. He picked up the phone. He looked at Marcus. He handed it to him without a word. Pruitt, already moving toward the front of the cabin, didn't see this. As they walked toward the door, Marcus passed Dr. Moore, who was still standing in the galley entrance. She reached out and touched his arm once lightly, the way a person touches someone to say, "I see you. I'm here." Marcus didn't stop walking, but he looked at her briefly and gave the smallest nod. Nadia Flores, 33 years old, in seat 4. A had been recording since the moment Holloway opened the overhead bin. She was a freelance journalist who had been on this flight purely by coincidence, returning to D.C. after covering a regional story in Dallas. Her phone was steady in her hand, and her face was the expression of a person who was documenting something, because the alternative, putting the phone down and pretending it wasn't happening, was not an option they could live with. In row 3, Jordan Park didn't say a word into the live stream. He just held the camera steady and let the image of Marcus being walked down the first-class aisle speak for itself. His viewer count had crossed 22,000. The aircraft door closed behind them with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. The holding room in Terminal C was the kind of room that exists in every large airport. Small, concrete, fluorescent, and designed not to be comfortable. The light was the flat kind that makes everyone look slightly wrong. The table was metal and bolted to the floor. The bench along the wall was metal and also bolted to the floor. Everything in the room was either bolted to the floor or bolted to the wall, because the room had been designed by someone who understood that people in this room were often there against their will. Pruitt closed the door. The magnetic lock engaged. He had zip ties out of his belt pouch before Marcus had reached the center of the room. "Hands behind your back. I want to state clearly that I am not resisting," Marcus said, "but I want it on record that you are applying physical restraints to a compliant subject who has committed no crime and who has offered to provide federal identification, which you have not asked to see." Pruitt applied the zip ties. The plastic tightened against Marcus's wrists, cutting into the soft tissue, immediate and specific. Marcus felt it and kept his face still. He did not sit down on the bench. He stood in the center of the room. Reyes stood near the door. He was not looking at Marcus. He was looking at a specific point on the wall 3 feet to Marcus's left, and he was very still in the particular way of a person whose internal debate has not yet resolved itself. Pruitt sat down at the metal desk in the corner and opened a laptop. Name: Marcus Darnell Webb. Pruitt typed. Address: "You have my driver's license and the personal effects you took from my bag." Pruitt looked up from the laptop. "Don't be difficult." "I'm not being difficult. I'm noting that the information you need is in the personal effects you confiscated." Pruitt pushed back from the desk and walked to the metal table where he had placed the contents of Marcus's pockets and bag during the pat-down, the leather wallet, the phone, a pen, the keys, a folded piece of paper that was a receipt from a coffee stand in the B terminal, and the messenger bag itself, its contents not yet removed. Pruitt picked up the wallet. He flipped it open with the confidence of someone who has done this many times and knows what to expect. A driver's license, some credit cards, maybe a library card or a loyalty program membership, the ordinary contents of an ordinary man's ordinary wallet. His thumb moved to the center divider. It touched something that was not a credit card, something with weight and texture, metal smooth with edges that caught the light differently than leather does. He pressed the divider open with his thumb. He saw the badge. He did not move for approximately 4 seconds. The badge was gold with an eagle crest and blue enamel lettering. It was exactly the size it was supposed to be. The weight of it was exactly right. It caught the fluorescent light of the holding room and threw it back in a way that left no room for doubt. United States Department of Transportation, Office of Inspector General, Senior Compliance Auditor. Pruitt stared at it. The room was very quiet. "Dale." Reyes had pushed off from the wall. He was moving toward the table. "Dale." Pruitt did not respond. Reyes looked at the badge. His eyes went wide in a way that he didn't try to control. "Oh." A pause. "Oh, man." Another pause. "Dale, that badge is real." Pruitt's jaw moved. He said nothing. Reyes turned to Marcus, and for the first time since they had entered the room, he met Marcus's eyes directly. "Sir." His voice had changed completely. It was quieter, more careful. "I'm sorry. We should have—" He stopped. Started again. "What do you need us to do right now?" But before Marcus could answer, something else happened. Something that shifted the balance of the room entirely, because Marcus had closed his eyes. The zip ties were biting into his wrists. The fluorescent light pressed down. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and something stale underneath it. Marcus closed his eyes, and he was 17 years old. He was in Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, and it was the first time he had ever been in an airport. The summer program scholarship had covered the flight to Washington, D.C., and the 2 weeks of pre-law study at Georgetown, and his mother had used part of her August grocery money to buy him a new backpack from Target, blue nylon with a front pocket that zipped twice, which she had told him was important, the kind of bag serious students used. She had pressed his collared shirt herself the night before. She had stood in the kitchen doorway and watched him pack. "You look right," she had said. "You look like you belong there." He had believed her. He had walked through the departures door of Hartsfield-Jackson at 6 in the morning with his pressed shirt and his Target backpack and the scholarship letter in the outer pocket, and the absolute, complete 17-year-old certainty that the world was going to receive him the way his mother saw him. He had been standing in the security line, the ordinary line, the one everyone stood in, when the TSA officer had stepped in front of him. Not the person in front of him, not the person behind him. Him. "Step out of the line, please." He had stepped out. Of course he had. He was 17, and the officer had a uniform and authority, and Marcus had been raised to respect both. "Where are you traveling to?" "Washington, D.C. I have a scholarship." "What's in the bag?" "Books, clothes. I have the letter right here." "Who packed this bag?" "I did. My mom helped." "Is anyone traveling with you?" "No, I'm alone. I'm going to a summer program. I have the letter." The letter was in the outer pocket. He had tried to show it. The officer had not looked at it. The questions had continued for 37 minutes. He had known the exact number because he had watched the clock on the departures board the entire time, watching his gate time approach and then pass. They had let him go without explanation. No apology. No acknowledgement that anything unusual had occurred. He had run through the terminal with his pressed shirt coming untucked and his Target backpack bouncing, and arrived at his gate 4 minutes after the boarding door had closed. He had missed the flight. He had sat on the floor of the terminal, 17 years old, alone with his scholarship letter in his hand. And he had not cried, because crying felt like confirming that the officer had been right about something, and the officer had not been right about anything. And Marcus had known this. Even at 17, with a fury so pure, it had nowhere to go. He had found an airline employee and explained the situation with a voice that he had made completely steady. The employee had found him a standby seat on a later flight. He had arrived in Washington 6 hours late and missed the opening dinner of the program. He had never told his mother. She would have been devastated in a way that would not have helped either of them. He had sat in the new city in his new program, and he had made himself one promise, not a loud promise. Not the kind you announce. The quiet kind, the kind that goes all the way down and stays. He would spend his professional life making sure that the officer's judgment never went unchallenged. Not because it had happened to him, because it happened every day to people who didn't have the resources, the knowledge, or the stamina to do anything about it. He had been keeping that promise for 27 years. He opened his eyes. The holding room, the zip ties. Pruitt still standing at the table with the badge open in his palm. Marcus turned to Reyes. "Cut the zip ties, return my phone, and let me make a phone call." Reyes moved before Pruitt could respond. He pulled the safety shears from his belt and cut the plastic restraints with 2 clean snips. Marcus brought his hands forward and rubbed his wrists. The marks were red and deep, clearly visible against his dark skin. Pruitt was still holding the badge. "Dale." Reyes's voice had taken on the quality of someone who has made a decision. "Give him his phone. Let him make the call. He could have." "Dale." Reyes looked at his partner. "That is a federal badge. I need you to hear what I'm saying." A long moment passed. Then Pruitt set the wallet down on the table without closing it, and Reyes picked up the phone and passed it to Marcus. Marcus looked at the screen. 14 missed messages, 3 missed calls, all from Desiree. He moved past them, scrolled to a contact he knew by memory, and pressed dial. He set the phone on the table on speaker. It rang once. Marcus. The voice that answered was deep and unhurried and carried the particular authority of someone who has been in important rooms for a very long time. You should be in the air. I'm in a holding room, Vivian. They used zip ties. 4 seconds of silence. In that silence, Marcus watched Pruitt's face change in real time. The way the color moved through it, the way the jaw tightened, the way the eyes shifted as the name registered. Vivian. Director Vivian Okafor. The name that appeared at the top of every DOT civil rights enforcement action filed in the past decade. Say that again. Ryan Garfield at the gate refused my boarding pass, redirected me to general boarding, and had his colleague recheck the manifest after the scanner confirmed my seat. Diana Price in the first-class cabin demanded identification that no other passenger was asked to provide. Captain Brett Holloway personally removed my bag from the overhead bin and ordered my removal from the aircraft. I was taken off by airport police without cause zip-tied and held in a terminal security room while the aircraft prepared to depart. Another silence, shorter this time. Officer Pruitt. Director Okafor's voice came through the phone speaker and filled the concrete room completely. This is Director Vivian Okafor, Office of Inspector General, United States Department of Transportation. The man in that room is a federal compliance officer conducting an active investigation into Valor Airlines. You are holding him with physical restraints on no legal basis, and you have refused to verify federal credentials that are sitting in your hand right now. A pause that was not a pause but a punctuation mark. You have 60 seconds to decide how you want this to end. Pruitt looked at the phone. He looked at Reyes. He looked at Marcus. He had come into this room 40 minutes ago, absolutely certain of what he was looking at. A man in a hoodie who didn't belong somewhere he had tried to put himself. The kind of situation Pruitt had resolved the same way 100 times and never questioned. The certainty had felt like competence. Now, standing in the fluorescent light with a federal badge on the table in front of him and a director's voice filling the room through a cracked phone speaker, the certainty felt like something else entirely, like a floor that had held 100 times and was now very quietly giving way. "He's free to go," Pruitt said. His voice came out smaller than he intended. "Not yet," Okafor said. "Mr. Ortega, the Valor station manager at DFW, needs to be at gate 44 in 5 minutes, and flight 882 does not leave the ground. Mr. Reyes is the flight still at the gate." Reyes stepped to the door, opened. It looked at the departure screen visible from the corridor. "Yes, ma'am. It looks like they're still in the taxi queue. They haven't taken off." "Good. Then we still have time to finish this properly." A brief pause. "Marcus." "I'm here. How are your wrists?" Marcus looked down at the marks. "I've been worse. That will be in the report." Another pause. This one different, carrying something that was not just professional. "You did the right thing, every step of it." "I know. Be at gate 44 in 8 minutes. I'll make sure the plane comes back." Reyes escorted Marcus through the terminal. He did not touch him. He walked slightly behind and to the left. Not the position of someone with authority over Marcus, but the position of someone making sure the path was clear. They passed through a section of Terminal C where the morning light was coming through the east-facing windows in long, flat rectangles, gold against the white tile. An older man, waiting at a gate across the concourse, looked up from his newspaper as they passed. A child at another gate tugged her mother's sleeve and pointed. The mother looked and quickly looked away. Marcus walked without hurrying. He was thinking not about what was ahead of him, but about a kitchen in Baltimore, about a phone call he needed to make. But first, there was a jet bridge to stand at, and a captain coming through a door. Inside Flight 882, the passengers had not been told why they hadn't moved. They had been sitting at the departure gate for 31 minutes beyond their scheduled departure time, and the only information Diana Price had provided was a brief, smooth announcement about an operational delay being resolved. This was the kind of language that airline crews used when the actual situation was something they were not prepared to explain. Jordan Park had not stopped live streaming. "Guys, we still haven't moved," he said into his phone, keeping his voice low. his eyes moving between the camera and the window where the gate equipment was visible. "It's been 31 minutes. Whatever happened here this morning, it is not over." On his screen, the viewer count read 67,400. The comments were moving faster than he could follow. "This is insane. The whole country is watching now. Turn the plane around. Somebody do something." In row 4, Anadia Flores had finished uploading the video to Reddit 17 minutes ago. She had titled it simply, "Valor Airlines flight crew removes black man from first class at DFW. Ticket was valid. This just happened." She refreshed the page. 89,000 upvotes. The post was trending in 3 subreddits simultaneously. She was already writing the first paragraph of her piece in her notes app. Dr. Patricia Moore was on her feet again. She had returned to the galley entrance twice since Marcus was removed, each time asking Diana for documentation of the incident, each time receiving the smooth, professional deflection of someone who had been trained to manage passengers without ever conceding anything. On her third approach, she stopped in the galley doorway and said, "Young woman, I have been a physician for 30 years. I have seen people in authority do harmful things and tell themselves it was policy. I am telling you as clearly as I can. What happened in this cabin this morning was not policy. It was judgment. And judgment can be wrong." Diana looked at her. For the first time that morning, something shifted behind her eyes. Not guilt exactly, but the beginnings of a reckoning. She opened her mouth. She closed it. From the front of the aircraft came the sound of the intercom system activating. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain." Holloway's voice, the practiced voice of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. "We've been notified of an operational matter at the gate that requires us to return to the terminal. We apologize for the inconvenience. This is expected to be a brief delay." The cabin reacted. The man in 1A, gray suit, expensive watch, made a sharp sound of frustration and began typing something on his phone. A woman in 3B said to her seatmate, "They're going back. What does that mean?" A businessman in row 5 called the flight attendant with his call button immediately. Jordan Park turned the phone camera toward his own face. His voice was very quiet. "Guys, the plane is going back to the gate. Someone stop this plane." He let that sit for 3 seconds. "Somebody made a call, and whoever made that call, you need to know that right now, 134,000 people are watching." He turned the camera back to the window where the aircraft was now slowly mechanically moving back toward the terminal. "Here we go," Jordan said softly. Ramon Ortega had been the Valor Airlines station manager at Dallas-Fort Worth for 11 years. He was a methodical, careful man. 43 years old, of Mexican descent, the kind of operations professional who prided himself on anticipating problems before they became incidents. He had never anticipated this. He was standing at gate 44 when Marcus came through the terminal with Reyes beside him. He had been on the phone with Director Okafor for 6 minutes and 40 seconds, and the conversation had done to his professional confidence what a flash flood does to a riverbank. Quiet and devastating, and very fast. He spotted Marcus from 30 feet away and walked toward him with the particular gait of a man trying to look composed while internally reorganizing everything he had thought he understood about the morning. He extended his hand. "Mr. Webb, I'm Ramon Ortega, station manager." Marcus looked at the offered hand. "Mr. Ortega." Ortega's hand dropped. He did not push the handshake. "I've spoken with Director Okafor. I understand the gravity of what has occurred this morning. I want you to know that I was not aware." "You'll have time to explain that in the formal review," Marcus said. "Right now I need to be at this gate when that aircraft docks." Ortega nodded. "The aircraft is being directed back now. Estimated docking in about 4 minutes." He hesitated. "Is there anything—" "No," Marcus said. "Thank you." He turned to face the gate. Behind the glass on the tarmac, the Boeing 737 was making its slow return, the engines cycling down to a lower register, the plane moving with the particular lumbering dignity of large machinery that is not designed to move backward. It was still the same aircraft it had been 43 minutes ago. but the weight of what it contained had changed entirely. Sofia Navarro was standing near the secondary podium. She had been standing there since Ortega had called the gate and told her to stay. She was watching Marcus. She had been watching him since he came through the terminal, and she had not looked away. Her hands were folded in front of her, and her face had the expression of someone who is carrying something and has not decided yet whether to put it down. Marcus noticed her. He didn't walk toward her. He held her gaze briefly across the distance between them, a look that was not accusatory and not absolution, but something more honest than either. Acknowledgement. He saw her. He saw what she had done and what she had not done. He saw both. She looked down, then she looked back up. She didn't move. The jet bridge alarm buzzed. Amber light. Connection confirmed. Marcus stood where he was. He was no longer holding the messenger bag. Reyes had offered to carry it, and Marcus had led him a small, practical concession. He stood with his hands at his sides, his DOT badge now clipped to the lanyard around his neck, the gold catching the terminal light. He looked entirely unremarkable. He looked like a man who had been waiting somewhere and was now simply waiting somewhere else. The jet bridge door opened. Captain Brett Holloway came through first. He had not been told why the flight had been recalled. He had been told only that operations had issued a ground directive and that he was to return to the gate. He had done this with the simmering fury of a man who considered his departure slot a personal possession that had been taken from him. He had spoken approximately 11 words to his co-pilot during the taxi back. He had spoken 0 to Diana Price. He came through the jet bridge door into Terminal C, and his eyes went immediately to Ortega. The station manager, the person who owed him an explanation, the person who was going to tell him who had done this and why and what was going to be done about it. But Ortega was not looking at Holloway. Ortega was looking slightly to the left of himself, and his body language was the body language of a man stepping aside. Holloway followed the look. He saw Marcus Webb, standing 15 feet away. In the gray hoodie and the jeans and the worn sneakers. The messenger bag with Reyes beside him, the gold badge on the lanyard around his neck clear and undeniable in the terminal light. The man he had thrown off his aircraft 43 minutes ago, standing at the gate when the aircraft came back. Brett Holloway had been flying commercial aircraft for 28 years. He had navigated instrument approaches in 0 visibility. He had managed engine failures at altitude. He had handled decompression events and medical emergencies and mechanical anomalies of every variety. He had always known what to do. The certainty of knowing what to do had been the bedrock of his professional identity. He did not know what to do now. His mouth was open. His face had gone through red to something past red, a kind of bloodless pale that looked wrong on a man his size. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the badge. He looked at Ortega, who would not meet his eyes. He looked at Reyes, who was expressionless. "You," Holloway whispered. It came out barely above a whisper. "Captain Holloway," Marcus said. His voice was calm and carried easily across the 15 feet between them. "My name is Marcus Darnell Webb. I am a senior compliance auditor with the Office of Inspector General, United States Department of Transportation." He let that sit for exactly 2 seconds. "I was assigned to this flight as part of an active federal compliance investigation into Valor Airlines. I was traveling in Seat 2A, which I booked 41 days ago with a government-issued credit card, and I provided identification to your gate agent, your lead flight attendant, and airport security as requested. Every step of the way." Another pause. "I'd like you to look at me, Captain, and I'd like you to tell me, right now in front of everyone here, why you believed I didn't belong on your aircraft." The terminal around them had gone quiet in the way terminals almost never go quiet. Passengers from nearby gates had turned. People who had been in motion had stopped. Jordan Park, who had moved off the aircraft with his phone still live streaming, had positioned himself at an angle that captured both men clearly. His viewer count 289,000 and rising. Holloway said nothing. For the first time in a very long time, he said nothing. The call came through Reyes's phone. Director Okafor on speaker held up by Reyes so both Holloway and Ortega could hear. "Captain Holloway, this is Director Vivian Okafor." I am the head of the Office of Inspector General at the Department of Transportation, and I am the direct supervisor of the officer you had removed from your aircraft this morning." Her voice was not loud. It had no need to be. "You have in the past hour directed your gate personnel to question a federal officer's valid credentials without grounds. You have directed your lead flight attendant to demand identification from that officer that no other passenger was required to provide. You have personally removed his personal property from an overhead bin and placed it on the floor of the aircraft in front of a cabin full of witnesses. You then authorized his physical removal and detention by airport security, during which he was restrained without cause." A pause. "I want to give you the opportunity to respond before I contact the FAA directly." Holloway looked at the phone. His hands had developed a faint tremor. I followed my judgment. The passenger appeared to be a black man in casual clothing sitting in first class, Director Okafor said. "And your judgment told you that was incompatible. That's what you'll be explaining in the Federal Review, Captain." A brief pause. "Mr. Ortega, I need Captain Holloway's credentials collected on site before he is permitted to leave this terminal." Ortega turned to Holloway. "Captain." His voice was very quiet. "Your ID and employee badge, please." Diana Price had come through the jet bridge behind Holloway. She was standing near the door, her uniform still perfect, her face no longer performing anything, just pale and very still. She watched Ortega speaking to Holloway. She watched Holloway's hands move to his chest. Brett Holloway had worn his Valor Airlines pilot wings for 28 years. He had pinned them on for the first time in a mirror in a Columbus, Ohio apartment at 27 years old. The year he got his commercial certification, the year his father came to see him fly for the first time. He had never thought about taking them off. He had thought they were as permanent as his name. His hands moved slowly. The left hand steadied the chest of his uniform. The right hand worked the pin loose from the back. The wings came away. He held them for a moment, the weight of them, which was nothing, which was everything, and placed them in Ortega's outstretched palm. Then his employee ID, then his gate access card. Ortega folded his hand around them. Jordan Park said nothing into his live stream. He had stopped narrating. He just held the camera steady. Diana Price stepped forward when Ortega turned toward her. She did not wait to be asked. She unpinned her own wings, her senior flight attendant identification, her gate access credentials. She placed them in Ortega's other hand without making eye contact with anyone. She looked at Marcus once, a look that lasted 1 second, and contained in its brief span something that was not an apology but was the closest she could manage to one, and then she looked away and did not look back. Ryan Garfield had been called from the gate by Ortega's message. He had walked the length of Terminal C, not knowing what was waiting for him at Gate 44, and he had arrived to find Holloway already standing with his wings surrendered and a crowd of passengers watching. Ryan looked at the scene. He looked at Marcus. He looked at Sophia Navarro, standing beside the secondary podium. Sophia looked at Ortega. Her voice was steadier than she had expected. "I want to make a statement for the record." Ortega looked at her. "I saw Mr. Garfield redirect Mr. Webb from the priority boarding lane this morning before he looked at the boarding pass. I should have said something immediately. I confirmed the manifest when asked, and I said it quietly, and I didn't make sure it was addressed." She swallowed. "I'm saying it now on the record." Ryan Garfield stared at the floor. Marcus looked at Sophia. He gave a single nod. The same nod he had given her across the concourse 20 minutes earlier. Simple. Direct, not mercy and not condemnation, just recognition. The passengers from Flight 882 filed through the jet bridge in small clusters, disoriented and slow, the way people emerge from any space where something unexpected has occurred. Some of them had been recording. Some of them had been watching without recording. Some of them had put their phones away when the security officers boarded and spent the following 40 minutes in the particular discomfort of people who witnessed something and chose not to intervene, and now had to carry that choice off the aircraft. None of them were celebrating. There was applause when the first group came through, scattered uncertain, the kind that starts when one person decides to begin and 3 or 4 others decide to follow. But it faded, almost immediately replaced by something more subdued, more complicated. People stood in the gate area and looked at Marcus standing near the podium with the badge on his lanyard, and they did not look the way people look when a movie ends. They looked the way people look when something real has happened that they were part of, whether they acted or not. Dr. Patricia Moore came through the door with the specific purposefulness of a woman who had known exactly what she was going to do when she reached the other side. She walked directly to Marcus and took his hand in both of hers, physician's hands, steady and warm, and held it without shaking it, just held it the way people hold things they want to make sure are still there. "I want you to know," she said, "that I saw everything. From the moment you walked through that cabin door. I saw every moment of it." Her voice was even. "And I am not proud of how long I waited to stand up." Marcus looked at her. "You stood up." "Not soon enough." "You stood up," he said again. "That's what counts." She held his hand for one more moment. Then she released it, nodded once with the finality of someone who has said what needed to be said, and moved toward the concourse. Marcus watched her go. Nadia Flores was the next person to approach him. She had her phone out, but not raised. She was holding it at her side, not recording, just carrying it the way journalists carry their tools even when they're not actively using them. "I'm a freelance journalist," she said. "I've been on board since Dallas. I have the full footage from the overhead bin incident through the removal." She paused. "I'd like to ask you a few questions. Not right now, if you don't want, but before you leave the terminal." Marcus looked at her. He looked at the phone in her hand. He looked at Ortega standing a few feet away, and at Reyes, who had set the messenger bag down by Marcus's feet. He looked across the gate area at Jordan Park, who had finally lowered his camera and was sitting in a chair near the window with the phone on his knee, the live stream still running. "Give me a few minutes," Marcus said to Nadia. "There's something I need to do first." Holloway was standing near the far wall of the gate area, waiting for an HR representative that Ortega had called. He was not making phone calls. He was not speaking to anyone. He was standing with the particular stillness of a man for whom stillness has become the only available option. Marcus walked toward him. He had thought about this moment on the jet bridge. He had thought about it in the holding room while Pruitt had his badge open in his palm. He had thought about what he wanted to say, and what would serve the situation, and what would be true, and what the distinction was between those things. He stopped about 4 feet from Holloway, close enough to speak without raising his voice, far enough to give both of them space. "Brett." Holloway looked up. It was the first time Marcus had used his first name, and the effect of it, the removal of the title, the flattening of the hierarchy, was visible on Holloway's face. He looked suddenly older. Marcus spoke without anger, without performance. He spoke the way he would have spoken to anyone he needed to say something true to. "I want you to understand something. This isn't about me. I have a badge. I have a director. I have an office in Washington that will file the paperwork and move on by Tuesday. My career is not damaged by what happened this morning." He paused. "But the person you were really hurting today, he doesn't have any of that. He doesn't have a director to call. He doesn't have federal credentials to lay on a table. He's the guy who saved up 6 months for a first-class seat to celebrate his promotion and got questioned 3 times before he reached the boarding door. He's a college student flying home for his grandmother's birthday in the only clothes he owns. He's a woman traveling alone who got asked for her ID twice because of the way she looks." Marcus held Holloway's gaze. "You didn't see me today, Brett. You saw a threat that wasn't there. And you've been seeing that same threat your whole career. The same assumption wrapped in different faces on 100 different flights. The difference between today and all those other days is that today, I was there to see it back." He stopped. "I'm not telling you this because I want you to feel bad. I'm telling you because every single person that assumption touched, every person who got walked off or questioned or made to feel like they'd made a mistake by sitting down in the seat they paid for, they deserved better than what your judgment gave them. And now you have to live with knowing that." Holloway's mouth moved. He was trying to say something. Marcus could see the effort of it, the way the jaw worked and the eyes shifted. But whatever words he was reaching for, they weren't coming. He looked like a man who has been handed a mirror at the wrong angle and is seeing his own face for the first time. Marcus nodded once. Then he turned and walked back toward the center of the gate area. Sofia Navarro was still at the secondary podium. She was no longer standing behind it. She had come around to the front and was leaning against the edge of it. Her arms folded not in defiance, but in the posture of someone who is holding themselves together through the physical pressure of their own arms. She looked at Marcus as he passed. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was small, but it was steady. "I knew. When you came through the priority line, I knew your ticket was right. I looked at the screen and I saw your name and I saw the seat and I knew. And I didn't say anything loud enough to matter." Marcus stopped. He looked at her, really looked at her the way he looked at witnesses and depositions, taking in the full picture. She was 26 years old, and she was afraid, and she had still done what she did. She had confirmed the manifest. She had said it quietly. And she had come to Ortega and made a statement on the record. "What you did took something," Marcus said. "You know that." She blinked. "I should have done more." "Yes," he said. "But you did something. And then you did more when it mattered." He looked at her steadily. "That's how this works. You don't always start at the finish line. You just have to start." She nodded. Her eyes were bright. She looked away before they became something more. Marcus picked up his messenger bag from where Reyes had set it and slung it over his shoulder. Jordan Park had turned off the live stream, finally, after 112 minutes, and was sitting in a chair looking at his phone with the expression of someone trying to process the gap between what he had planned for the morning and what the morning had become. He looked up as Marcus passed. "Hey," Jordan said. "I don't know if it means anything, but I want you to know I'm going to make sure people see the whole thing." "I know," Marcus said. "Thank you for staying in your seat." Jordan looked at him. "I never moved." "I know," Marcus said again. "That's what I mean." Ortega approached Marcus with the particular careful energy of a man carrying an offering he is not sure will be accepted. "Mr. Webb, we have a replacement crew. We could have you in Washington in approximately 40 minutes. First class all the way. No charge, obviously. And anything else we can—" "I appreciate that, Mr. Ortega." Marcus looked at the gate at the aircraft, still at the terminal at the empty boarding lane. "But I'll take the train." Ortega blinked. "The train. Amtrak. Union Station in D.C. It's about 24 hours, but there's a dining car and nobody questions whether you belong in your seat because of what you're wearing." He said it without edge. It was simply true. Ortega didn't have a response for that. He nodded slowly with the particular nodding of a man absorbing something he will be thinking about for a long time. Marcus looked at Reyes. "Thank you for cutting the zip ties." Reyes had his hands at his sides, and his face had the expression of a man who is not going to forget this day. "Yes, sir." He paused. "I should have looked at the badge earlier." "Yes," Marcus said simply. "You should have. So should a lot of people." He looked at Reyes. Not to punish him, but to make sure he heard it. Remember that. Reyes held his gaze. "Yes, sir." Marcus turned toward the terminal exit. "If this story is making your blood move, if watching one man stand his ground in a gray hoodie and change the course of everything moved you the way it moved me, hit that subscribe button right now. And share this video with someone who needs to see it, because what Marcus did next, what he left behind in that terminal, is only the beginning. Keep watching." The gate area was still settling. People moving slowly, conversations in low voices. The departure board blinking with the new status of Flight 882. Canceled. Operational. Marcus walked through the space without looking back. The terminal around him had returned to the business of being an airport. The coffee stands, the charging stations, the families and the business travelers and the students and the retirees, all moving through the space on their own paths, their own stories. He passed through the exit toward the ground transportation level, and the automatic doors slid open and the outside air came in. Dry and warm Dallas in the morning, and he walked through it. The Amtrak Texas Eagle departed Union Station, Dallas at 2:15 in the afternoon and would arrive in Washington, D.C. the following morning. Marcus had a private roomette, which he had booked on his phone in the taxi from DFW. The room was small. A folding seat that converted to a bed, a narrow window, a sliding door that locked from the inside. It smelled of metal and upholstery, and the faint diesel and distant smell of long-distance trains that is unlike anything else in the world. He sat with his back to the direction of travel and watched the city give way to the flat, scrubby Texas landscape and then to nothing in particular. Just horizon and sky and the occasional water tower or barn, everything unhurried and spacious in the way that nothing inside a terminal ever is. His phone had 47 messages. He had read 3 of them. He would read the rest in Washington. He leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. He let himself go somewhere he had been avoiding all day. He was back in the kitchen in Baltimore. He was 17. The night before the Atlanta flight, not the morning after it. His mother was at the ironing board pressing the collar of his blue-collared shirt, the one she had taken off a sale rack at Macy's 3 weeks before, and set aside specifically for this trip. The kitchen smelled of the starch she used, which always made him think of Sunday mornings and church and sitting still in ways he didn't always manage to sit still. His backpack was open on the kitchen table. His mother had made him pack and repack it twice, checking everything the scholarship letter in the outer pocket, the emergency $20 in the inner zippered compartment that she told him to only use for emergencies and that he had never spent. She was pressing the collar, and she was not looking at him. She was looking at the work of the collar moving the iron with the care of someone performing something important, and she said, "You look right, baby. You look like you belong there." He had felt it. In that kitchen in that moment, he had felt completely and entirely like he belonged everywhere he was going. The certainty of his mother's belief in him had been indistinguishable from certainty itself. He had not told her what happened at the airport. Not that morning, not in any of the phone calls from D.C., not when he came home 2 weeks later. He had protected her from it the way children sometimes protect parents from the true weight of the world. Not because she couldn't carry it, but because she had already carried so much. In the roomette on the Texas Eagle 30 miles out of Dallas, Marcus reached into his pocket and found his phone. He pressed her name. It rang twice. She answered on the second ring the way she always did, as if she had been expecting it, as if the call were simply the next thing in a sequence she had been following all along. "Hey, baby, how was the flight?" Marcus looked out this window. The horizon was perfectly flat and perfectly gold in the late afternoon sun. "I didn't fly, Mom. I took the train." "The train, A-beat. Is everything okay?" Marcus thought about the holding room and the zip ties and Holloway's face when he came through the jet bridge door. He thought about the badge in Pruitt's hand and the look on Reyes's face when he finally understood. He thought about Dr. Moore holding his hand at the gate and Sophia Navarro's voice when she said, "I'm sorry," and meant it, and the 4 seconds of silence after Director Okafor stopped speaking. "Yeah," he said. "Everything's okay." A long pause. "I think I finished something today, Mom. Something I started a long time ago." She was quiet for a moment. He could hear her breathing steady and unhurried, the sound of a woman who had learned to wait for her son to find the words for things. "Tell me," she said finally. And for the first time in 27 years, he told her about Atlanta. The formal consequences of that morning at DFW Terminal C unfolded in stages, not all at once, but with the slow grinding certainty of processes that cannot be stopped once they are set in motion. Captain Brett Holloway's flight credentials were suspended the day after the incident pending FAA review. The review, when it concluded 6 weeks later, found a pattern in his service record. 11 passenger removal incidents over 3 years, all logged under the designation behavioral concern, all involving passengers of color, none involving white passengers during the same period. The FAA permanently revoked his commercial pilot's license. 28 years of flying ended not on a runway, but in a conference room in Arlington, Virginia, with attorneys present and a stack of documents that told a story Holloway had never had to read from the outside before. The image of him handing over his wings at Gate 44 became something people shared long after the original video had stopped trending. Not as a victory lap, but as a reminder of how far the cost of a single assumption can reach. Diana Price and Ryan Garfield were terminated from Valor Airlines within 2 weeks. Sophia Navarro was retained. Her on-record statement was cited specifically in Director Okafor's report as an example of an employee choosing accountability over self-protection when it mattered. She received a commendation 3 months later and a promotion to gate supervisor, not because of what had happened, but because of who she had shown herself to be when the pressure was highest. Valor Airlines received a formal compliance action notice from the Department of Transportation, 63 pages requiring mandatory retraining of all boarding personnel, independent monitoring of passenger removal incidents, and quarterly reporting to the DOT Civil Rights Division for the following 24 months. The CEO of Valor Airlines read the report in a quiet office on a Tuesday afternoon and called Director Okafor directly. The words she used were simple. "We failed. Tell me where we start." It was the right question. It was also the only question that mattered. Jordan Park donated the full advertising revenue from the live stream, which ultimately reached 14 million views, to a nonprofit legal fund supporting passengers who had faced discrimination in air travel. Nadia Flores published her piece in The Atlantic 41 days after the incident. It was titled simply, "The Man in the Gray Hoodie." It was read by 3.2 million people in its first week. 6 months later, Marcus Webb walked through Terminal C of Dallas-Fort Worth Airport wearing a Navy suit. He was in Dallas for a transportation equity conference and had arrived a day early. He moved through the terminal without hurrying. He stopped at Gate 44. The gate looked the way gates always look. Behind the podium stood a young man Marcus had not seen before. Late 20s, brown skin, a Valor Airlines uniform he was wearing with the slight self-consciousness of someone who had not had it long. He was scanning boarding passes as passengers approached one after another, each one receiving the same smooth sequence. Greeting, scan, send-off. A young black woman in her mid-20s approached the podium. She was wearing leggings and a university sweatshirt. She had a rolling suitcase and earbuds in one ear, and she looked the way people look at airports when they are traveling alone and not thinking about anything except getting where they are going. The gate agent looked up. He looked at her, just at her, not at the calculation that used to happen here. And he smiled. "Good evening. Heading to Denver tonight?" "Yeah. Seat 12F. He scanned her pass. "Perfect. We're boarding in about 10 minutes. Have a great flight." She thanked him with the brief distracted gratitude of a person who has not thought twice about the exchange because there was nothing to think twice about. She moved toward the seating area. The agent was already looking at the next passenger. 15 seconds, unremarkable, ordinary. Marcus stood at the edge of the gate area and watched. He stood there after it was over, watching the ordinary rhythm of a gate, operating the way a gate is supposed to operate, with courtesy without assumptions, without the invisible calculation that had made this particular gate famous for all the wrong reasons. He did not feel triumphant. He felt something quieter than that and more permanent. His own flight boarded 20 minutes later. He settled into seat 2A. The flight attendant offered a glass of water before pushback. "Anything else before we push back?" "No, thank you." When the plane lifted off, Marcus looked out the window at the runway lights beginning to blur with distance. He let himself think about the thing he almost never allowed himself to think about. The 17-year-old on the floor of an Atlanta terminal alone holding a scholarship letter. He thought about what he would say to that boy now. He would not say that it gets easier. He would not say that the world becomes what it should be. He would say, stand up. Not because you will always win. Not because the room will always change the moment you refuse to leave it. But because the act of standing, of refusing to accept that you do not belong where you have earned the right to be, is the thing that makes the next person standing a little less alone. You will not always see the result, but it will have mattered. It always matters. The aircraft reached altitude. The clouds spread out below, soft and endless, and lit from beneath by a world still turning. Marcus closed his eyes. He was just a man on a plane, going home, sitting in the seat he had paid for, treated with the same quiet respect as everyone else on board. Like anyone, like everyone. That had always been the whole point. If Marcus Webb's story moved you, if his quiet refusal to accept that he didn't belong stayed with you the way it stays with everyone who hears it, then please take 2 seconds right now and hit that like button. It costs you nothing, and it helps this story reach someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story like this one. Stories about dignity, about standing your ground, about the small moments that change everything. Share this video with someone in your life. A friend, a family member, someone who needs a reminder that one person standing still and standing firm really can move the world. And drop a comment below. Tell me, would you have stood your ground the way Marcus did because every day in airports and offices and waiting rooms all over this country, someone is being told they don't belong where they've earned the right to be? The only question is whether the people around them will stay silent or stand up. Until next time. Till next, be the person who stands up.